Hey, I'm Dr. Nicole and this is the Hey Kiddo podcast where we talk about all things parenting. And today I'm talking with Demi about how parents can help spark and stimulate creativity and imagination in their kiddos. Demi is an incredible art therapist and licensed professional counselor, and also oversees the creation and design of all of our social, emotional, and therapeutic content at HeyKiddo. She's amazing, and I'm so excited to be able to chat with you today, Demi. Welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. All right. So we're talking creativity. We're talking about sparking imaginations in kiddos. So I think backing up, what has your experience in the creative arts therapies taught you about working with parents and kids? Like, what are the nuggets?
So many nuggets to share.
Mm.
But yeah, I think my experience in the creative arts therapies, and for those who aren't familiar with these modalities, this includes art therapy, dance movement therapy, music therapy, and other expressive modes. My specialty in art therapy, especially, has taught me that parents and kids can benefit from a lot of the techniques that these modalities teach. A lot of people think that, just it's just for kids, right? Kids learn through art making and music and all these sorts, but so can parents, right? The more you learn how kids express and how they relate to the world, the better you can relate to them as a parent and as a caregiver. So that's a huge nugget that I've learned. Also, like what I really admire around working with kids is that they just say and do whatever
Yeah,
they want, you
whatever.
know, whatever. And it's so honest and authentic and so
Yeah.
playful. So,
Yep.
like, just to be able to zoom in on that for a minute, and like, I feel like sometimes as adults and as parents, we're kind of detaching from that like natural mode of expression. And I have learned so much just from watching kids and working with them and
Mm.
like trying to learn that again for myself as an adult in the world.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're saying that because it's hard. I feel like my son, as you know, is 5 or almost 5. And I feel like I'm having a rebirth of my creativity. Like I was a very creative child and I was in dance and theater and did all the things and loved it. And then became a psychologist, and became very like not creative, like creative mentally, but not creative in like the arts. And, I've really missed that part of my life. And having Charlie and like kind of evolving with his creativity, like I have rediscovered my love for drawing. I have rediscovered my love for imagination. I was so disconnected from it. And it's interesting because I'm finding that now that I'm engaging with him, like, first of all, and I want to talk more about this, it has brought us like in our relationship, Charlie and I, to a different level
Mhm.
and like a more connected and fun level. But secondly, like I've seen the benefits for myself. Like it's making me think better. It's making me like put things together better because it's almost giving my brain a break. I don't know. Like tell me about that.
It's true, right? In the psychology and like therapy world, it's like, wait, we forget that it's like a social science. It's about relating to people, right? And I
Right.
think our kids can teach us that. I think, yeah, I love that you brought it back to your childhood and being so creative and kind of losing
Yeah.
touch with that. And kids can be that physical reminder of like, wait, what am I doing? I love these things. I can actually be more present in my communications when I'm doing a creative activity, for example. So, right, when you're drawing with Charlie, like
Yeah.
sometimes time just falls away, doesn't it? And you just feel like you're like in the zone and nothing else matters except you, him, and the art materials.
Completely. And I will say, I find it, and I want to ask you about this because I find it easier than just regular play. And I know a
Yeah.
lot of my, friends that have kids in this age have talked about that, like have talked about like I'm not good at getting down on the ground and playing. I'm not good at that. Like have talked about that. Like what's the difference in like playing versus being creative? And there might not be a difference, but what are your thoughts in that?
There actually are a lot of similarities, but there are differences. So I think that's a really good one to hit on. Like if we take it just to a therapy space, for example, for a minute, like art therapy is a different modality than play therapy. And there's a reason for that. um Play, you get into this like imaginative space, right?
Yeah.
And like you can create stories and build atmospheres and do all these things where you can do that in art as well, right? But there's like a physical medium that is allowing you to express in a different
Mm,
way than maybe toys can allow you to express. You can create an image of yourself, rather than grabbing an object and seeing a representation of you. There's like a real intimacy when you start to put your own vision out into the world in a product that
hmm.
reflects who you are. So I imagine when you're sitting with Charlie and if he's starting to draw images, stick figures of them doing things, you could like ask him like, "Hey, like, is this you? Are you seeing
Right.
yourself doing this thing?"
Right.
If he's able to
Right.
be like, "Yeah," like, that is a story that he's creating, but it's through his own hand, right?
Right.
It's his image of his own life being projected onto a piece of paper, which I think is such a powerful communication tool.
So powerful. And you said something that's interesting, like distinguishing between like typical play and versus art or creative projects. Like I wonder
Mhm.
if it's easier because again, people I know that talk about feeling guilty actually about not liking to play. I wonder if it's just that creative activities actually have a little, and I don't mean to use the word structure, but there's
Mhm.
a thing that you're doing together versus the universe of play, which can go anywhere. Like it's so unstructured. You have no idea where it's going to go. And it might be harder for us adults, not all of us, but it might be harder to like follow that if we're out of practice. Like, is it a practice thing?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with comfort, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
you brought it to a place of comfort and structure. And those two
Mm-hmm.
things they go hand in hand, right? Like if somebody came to me, a parent especially, and was like, "I don't know how to play with my kid. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I feel like I'm not doing the right things." I would be like, "Okay, whoa, what are you doing together?"
Right.
If their answer is, "I'm doing this activity and I'm doing da 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 da," that that would be my recommendation from the get-go, right? More structure will provide you more of the steps to like
Right.
feel comfortable in doing that activity with your kid. And the same thing goes for art making, right? Um, Asking Charlie to, draw an animal is different than, "Hey, draw anything you feel."
Right.
One is very ambiguous and big that has a whole world out there that he could project rather than a structured activity that even you might feel comfortable sitting down with him to do. Because then you can draw your favorite animal rather than anything that comes to your mind,
Right.
which I know you have a lot on your mind day to day,
Right.
right? It can
Right.
feel
Right.
overwhelming.
Right. So what's better? Like when you advise parenting adults, how do you help adults inspire and promote creativity and imagination in their children when they might not be as imaginative and as creative as or as in touch with it for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there are several things. I think one is just joining in creative projects with their kids. And it might feel uncomfortable, it might feel new, it might feel like
Hmm.
you haven't done it in years, but letting them lead, whether it is in play or in art making or in dancing or strumming a guitar, right? Whatever it is, have confidence in kids to lead the way, right? Because they're expressing so naturally in
Mm,
that mode all the time. So for example, if you saw Charlie or just another kid doing something, right, that looks fun to you, that looks inviting but scary, like what would it be like to go up to them and just be like, "This looks fun. Can I join
yeah.
in? Can you teach me the way?" And it
Huh.
takes the pressure off of you to feel like you have to know how to do this thing. Your
Mm,
kid already knows. They're just waiting for you to come
mm.
on.
Okay. So it doesn't interrupt, like when you go to participate, it doesn't interrupt their creative process.
No, I like to think of it more of like, imagine you were like a fly on the wall, right? You're just watching and you're just waiting for the to moment to comment on something that they're doing or to really attune to their behavior, right? You can
Mm,
tell they're really excited about something. Hop in and be excited with them. That's not going to interrupt their process. It's only going to elevate it. It's only going to make it more
right.
enjoyable most
Heighten
times.
more. So, like, if you just gave some language, but if you were to give our listeners tips about, like, okay, what is the language that promotes creativity and what's the language that shuts down that we might unintentionally use?
Mm, yeah. Ooh, I like that one. Um, Language is such a big thing in parenting, and I think just communicating with people more generally, right? Like, what are the do's and don'ts? And I think when it comes to creativity, um, being able to like spot and like reward kids' creativity and individuality, you can do it in so many different ways. And I think what is most successful is being cautious of labeling what they're doing as like beautiful or attaching
Mm,
these adjectives that make them strive beyond their skill level, right? So instead of let's take a art making activity, right? A kid is drawing and you want to join in on it and you do. But what you say is this drawing is beautiful. That puts so much expectation on the kid to only create
mm,
something that is beautiful or aesthetically pleasing, which happens a lot in art school, and we can go into that, right? People who do this for a living, right? Engage in the
yeah.
arts. There's so much pressure there. Instead, use language like, "Ah, this drawing is one of a kind. It feels just
Mm.
like you. Your creativity inspires me," right? Pointing to their strength and their individuality is going to promote whatever they want to draw, whatever they want to create without that burden of it being perfect.
Oh, I love that. And boy, have I used the wrong language. But I love that. I love that. It's so second nature. I like it's so interesting talking to people like you because you realize, like, even though I am a psychologist, you realize that with your own kid, you just start fall into the trap. Like, I do say things like beautiful, this is the coolest thing ever. But yeah, like it is like it's so uniquely you. Like that's so cool. I love that. Let me ask you this question around this. So one of the things that I said is, Charlie has gotten really into drawing and it's triggered in me. I used to be very into drawing when I was a kid, like, but for years now, I like botch up drawing. Like I'll do stick figures for animals and like pretend I can't. But I was working with him, like playing with him, and we were drawing, and he's like, "Mommy, draw this dinosaur." And it like spark like it just brought up like, my God, I forgot I can draw. Like I forgot that this was a thing I had honed when I was young. And I drew. And so we've been drawing together. But what I've recognized, and I want your advice on this,
Mhm.
is my drawings, like they definitely need work and I need to hone this skill again, but they're good. And his drawings are different.
Uh-huh.
But he
Look at that
looks
language use.
they're
You just
different.
did it.
They're different. I don't want to put out his flame. I don't want to pull out his flame, but I also don't want to like repress what I'm doing. Like he also needs to learn that, and we're doing growth mindset now, but he also needs to learn that this is something he can hone. How do you do
Mhm.
that?
You definitely can't hide your ability, right? Like
Hmm.
that would do him and so many other kids a disservice, right? I think modeling is one of the best ways to build all the skills you're referencing, to build creative potential, growth
Hmm.
mindset, resilience, right? These can all go hand in hand. I'll give you a practical example.
Okay.
I you're bringing up an experience where I was working with a kid
Hmm.
and in this age group actually, right? Like early
Hmm.
childhood. And he asked me, "Do you know how to draw people?" And I was like, yeah, I have some arts background. He said, oh, okay, well, can you draw me? And I was like, I think I can, but I'm only going to do a really quick sketch and I want to see what you think about it. So I did a quick sketch and he was like, his mind was blown. He was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, I could never draw something like that. Like, that is unbelievable. And in that moment, I learned a lot. And I brought it to a place of, does this really look like you? You feel like this represents you? Instead of drawing attention to my abilities, right? They were already out
Yep.
there. It was drawing attention to, okay, this looks like you. What did I do right that makes you
Right.
feel like I nailed it? And then he was able to point to all the things that he saw in himself in that
Mm.
piece. And I was like, hey, you know what? You know how many years it took me to draw faces and people like this? So many years of practice, more practice than how old you are right now. And he was like, whoa. I was like,
Right.
yeah, like if you just keep
Right.
practicing, you're going to be able to draw anything you put your mind to. And so I
Right.
think that's what it's about, being able to model what they're interested in and being able to uplift them and encourage them to continue
Mm.
fine-tuning these abilities. Drawing does not come naturally to a lot of people. It takes a
No,
lot
not
of
at all.
hand-eye, fine motor
Yep.
coordination.
Yep. So what do you do? What do you do when a child in any creative pursuits, dance, theater, all of it, drawing, all of it, singing, starts to beat themselves up? Or it's like no good, like this isn't, and really has a freak. What do you do?
Those moments, I think it's so important to just like meet them where they are. Like reflecting back some of the words that they're using about their abilities or about themselves. So I imagine like, you know, one phrase that many parents have probably heard is like, I'm no good at this. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to do this anymore, or I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to make this anymore. And I think reflecting that back in a way that's like, oh, this seems like to be a tough challenge, right? And it's making you feel like you can't do this. But
Mm.
like, I want you to know that like you can. Let's
Mm-hmm.
let's try to tackle it together. Like it's okay to be able to acknowledge feelings and then provide that necessary support when you hear it. Because when I hear phrases like that from kids, they're crying out for help. They're like, "Ugh, I'm doing this thing. I want to be really good at it, but I'm just not right now. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
meeting my own expectations. So how can you
Mm-hmm.
help them meet those expectations and like start to incorporate language, more positive language that'll help them reach that?
I love that. I love that. That's awesome. With that note, like in your experience as a therapist, in your experience as a human being, as your experience as an artist too, what do you feel tapping into the creative side and inspiring that in young people? Like what does it do for us as human beings?
Oh, I think it does so much. I think creativity is one of the biggest strengths of like the human race, right? Like when we think of to like ancient times, like we were communicating through art, through
Yeah.
creative means.
Yep. Yep.
So tapping back into that, I think is incredibly important. I know in moments where I'm not being as creative, physically or mentally, right? You pointed to creative thinking, creative problem solving, like that is being creative. And when I'm not engaging in those modes as often, I don't feel as energized. I don't
Mm,
feel like my life is as like purposeful and meaningful as it could be.
yeah.
Um, it's not tapping into what I know I bring most like effortlessly into the world. And I think everybody has that within them. And I think we just got to be reminded of it.
Yep.
And I think one way I remind myself of that is like embracing like the child version of myself. Like when I
Mm-hmm.
find myself being too serious or too scientific, I'm like, Demi, like, what would
Yeah.
the 5-year-old you be saying
Yep.
or doing right now? And it would not be any of that. It would be
No,
like
it'd
my
probably
inner
be poop.
child. It would, yeah, yeah, or just making loud, weird sounds, right? But that
Right.
was a way for me to be creative and to express
Right.
my voice.
And is there, I mean, there's a lot of research and a lot of science around how, like, really helping foster and promote and nurture creative sides of children can help them with the other stuff, like with math, with language, with all of the things. What do you know about that?
I know there's so much research out there that correlates creativity with critical
Hmm.
thinking and problem solving, right? I mean, like they're almost infused into one. When we think of a problem in our world, we can't just always take the same steps to
Right.
solve it, right? Like we have to get creative around different
Right.
solutions with different people and different settings. So yeah, I think being able to like see a balance in how
Hmm.
our strengths can be used. And so there's also a lot of research on strengths use and creativity and critical thinking or judgment are two strengths that we can all relate to as humans that we have that we possess. But like sometimes we think that these strengths are in conflict with one another when they are actually a lot of the time correlated and can be uplifted and
Huh.
combined to show up as our best.
Love that. I love that. I want to step back and get like academic for a second.
Okay.
Can you walk us through the stages of childhood? Meaning like when can kids do what and what should we expect as parents with the
Yeah.
stages cognitively?
For sure. Um, yeah, so child development is one of my favorite areas. I think in part it brought me to this field, so this is like right in my wheelhouse, so I
Yeah,
might get all giddy talking about it. But
get giddy.
aside from that, um, yeah, when we think about the stages of childhood, I think it's important to start there, right? No matter how old your kid is, they have usually the capacity to meet certain milestones, right? So when we think about infancy into toddlerhood, into preschool, into school age, all the way into pre-adolescence and onward, there are different abilities that we can start to track and observe in kids. So when we think about different areas of development, cognitive development is one, and I'll go
Hmm.
deeper into that because it relates to our conversation. But there's also physical development,
Right.
social emotional development, which we care a lot about
A
at Hey
lot.
Kiddo,
Yeah.
um, and language development, right? There's so
Hmm.
many different areas that we can start to observe. And some kids are excelling in some areas and, need a little improvement in others, and that's okay. Cognitive development is what I'd like to focus more on, right? Because when we think about critical thinking and creativity and problem solving, that's where cognitive development really comes in. And, you know, there's so many developmental psychologists out there, but one in particular, bringing it to the most academic level, Piaget. And I
Yep.
don't know if many, Nicole, I know you know, but
Yeah.
this was a pioneering psychologist
Yep.
who really focused in on thinking, cognition, and how that
Yes.
develops in childhood. And I think it's important to start to understand how kids move through these stages because it'll impact how parents can communicate with them.
Hmm.
Um, so there are three stages I can zoom into now a little bit more
Yes.
deeply. For those parents out there who have kids between like ages 2 and 7, right? It's likely that their kids are falling into this pre-operational stage of development. And what this means is they're naturally engaging in symbolic play,
Yep.
imaginative play, right? Which started our conversation here.
Hmm.
Um, this is the ability to you know, go full force into creating whatever they want without a whole lot of thought into how others are seeing it, how others are
Yeah.
thinking about it, right? It's almost like what we call a very egocentric
Right.
focus, right? They are in this world and they are making whatever they want out of it.
Yep.
And that's a beautiful thing to
Oh
watch.
boy, if we could all just live there. Man.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happens, right? When, 7-ish, and again, this is all variable. depending on
Sure.
kids and their individual needs and development. But around that age, we start to transition into more of a concrete operational stage. And what this means is that this is where the critical thinking and more of the logical thought starts to be able to like actually happen, right?
Yeah.
So kids are starting to be able to take in other people's perspectives and feelings in a new way that they
Yeah.
haven't ever been able to before. So while they can still engage in that playful, creative, imaginative space, they're starting to observe others more deeply. They're starting to
Yeah.
think, how are my actions impacting others? How are they making them feel? And I think that's a perfect time in development to really leverage their creativity and leverage their thinking, their critical thinking skills to like better balance how they
Mm.
approach the world, right? You can still be creative and critical in everything that you do because we have to maintain being curious to continue to learn.
Right. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, and I
Mm.
think just lastly, the other stage is like formal operational, right? And this is just being able to think more abstractly. So I think some parents kind of lose their kids at certain ages where they're like, "Hey, have you thought about this in this way?" And their kids like, "No," because they're not at that stage to be able to like take concrete ideas or think critically about them and transition them to this abstract level, right? So I think
Right.
that's important to note when we're trying to like engage our kids in really curious topics and
Yeah.
things.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. You know, when you look at, thank you for bringing us through that because I think it's so important in Piaget. I mean, like, yes, this is it's the father of it.
Yeah.
And it makes such logical sense. You know, when you think about social emotional development specifically,
Hmm.
and that transition from that like around 7 years old to like a little bit older. And then you start noticing your impact and how you feel that like how other people are impacting and all the social stuff.
Hmm.
What's your like, where does creativity come in? Like, how do you use it throughout all these phases to build social emotional skills? And what are your thoughts on that? Sorry, it's a roundabout way of asking that.
I think never like allowing a kid to just put their creativity aside. That would be like my biggest tip is like to always bring in their own perspective, right? Because that is a creative approach. We
Yeah.
all approach
Yeah.
things differently, and that's unique to us, and it's a creative branch of us. So when I think about social emotional skills and creativity being a part of that, I think about empathy. I think about perspective taking, and I think about questions like, how would you want to approach this person? How would you want to make this person feel comfortable? Bringing their perspective in, getting them to think creatively around different things that they can do, the impact they can have, I think would be, I mean, one of the best ways to integrate all of these
Mm-hmm.
skills into one.
Mm-hmm. I love that. You know, with older kids, with tweens and like around 8 and up, I'm thinking about the times where kids get shamed for their creativity and get teased for their creativity. How parents can help support their children around that and help, you know, especially when children are like, "Oh, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm getting teased and I'm noticing I am." Like, how can parents continue to promote it and help support their child? Because that's hard because
Mm.
kids can be real mean.
Yeah, speaking of kids just say and do whatever they want, right?
Exactly, exactly. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, parents usually are the first line of defense, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes they're the first people to really like be able to see the emotional impact that bullying or teasing can have on their kids. Um so yeah, when it comes to creativity and them getting teased for their creative expression, making sure that there's a space in the home to continue that development if they don't feel comfortable in expressing it outside of the home, right? Because of the impact it's having on them and their peers and their friends. Not letting it just stop, right?
Hmm.
Um, that's one way that a parent can support it. So saying something like, sometimes kids are mean. And even though I believe you're so creative, they're not appreciating it like I am. But like, I think it's important because I can see that you're so happy when you're
Yeah.
drawing or when you're playing music, and your happiness means everything to me.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do something that's going to make you happy today, and like allow them to choose a creative task or activity that makes them feel that
Mm-hmm.
way, and make a routine of it. So like in time, when they continue to build up the confidence at home, even when they get knocked down outside
Yeah.
of the home,
Yep.
they they know what it takes. They can start to believe in themselves again. So when they
Mm-hmm.
get to that certain age where they care less about what other people think, which will
Yeah.
happen, that then it's just gonna be like all guns a-blazing. And, sorry for that metaphor and
Yeah.
phrase. That was a very country thing for me to say, but, um, they'll feel more confident in just allowing themselves to express themselves however, and we see that, right, in adolescence and early
Right.
adulthood, where, like,
Right.
kids just don't care anymore. They're just letting it all loose. So if parents can support their kids through that roughest time period, which is usually
Yeah.
middle and high school, like support it at home, foster it, validate their feelings, do all the things, and then know that when they feel ready and feel most confident at that high, they'll just let it all loose. And that's going to be the most happiest version of
Right.
themselves.
So it's okay not to force is the wrong word. It's okay not to force your child to keep on expressing it publicly, but to foster that comfort at home to express it until they're ready to go back publicly.
Yeah, I think forcing things is I don't want to say never a good idea, but almost never.
Hmm.
Because when we start to force things onto kids, they feel like they lose a sense of choice and autonomy, which takes away from their individuality, from their voice. So if you can find a way to roundabout it, create the space for it, to uplift it whenever you're around, right? It'll start to slowly build up to when they're ready, they'll do it. It's their choice because it's
Okay.
who they are.
It's because who they are. I love that. I want to circle back around. I have two more questions for you. I want to circle back around to what I was trying to, like what we were talking about in the beginning.
Yeah.
So, okay, for the parents out there that really don't engage in creative act, like really don't like it, and
Yeah.
again, really don't like play, really don't like engaging in creative activity, don't like that part of parenting. What do you suggest? What's a middle ground?
I would say a middle ground would be to sit with your kid when they're doing a creative project, and to don't feel like to not feel forced to be a part of it. If joining in feels too uncomfortable, then just being there, sitting and watching, knowing that your kid like knows you're there and that you're being present with it, just like how your kid can inspire you, the you
Yeah.
know they go hand in hand, right? You can then be inspired by your kid and vice versa. Um, I think that would be my biggest advice. Surrounding yourself with creativity might provide you with more comfort to get in tapped with that again.
Got you.
Because your kid is, right? Because they're doing it.
Right.
So why not do it with them when you feel more comfortable?
Right. I love that. And actually, if a child is not imaginative, let's say going through that 2 to 7, and they're not imaginative, should you be concerned? How can you foster? Like, talk about that.
All kids aren't super imaginative, right? Like I've met some kids who they're like, you could tell from a baby, their mind is just thinking in a different way.
Yeah.
Um, I'm thinking about a few kids who I've worked with where you could just tell they were more like math, science oriented. All of their interests were in that realm. Um, and that's great, right? We all have our strengths and things that interest us. I would say if your kid doesn't want to engage in imaginative play or is not interested at all in the arts, maybe you can relate to that on some level, right? Then like meet them where they are in that as well. So if their interest is in technology, right? If they're of age where it's appropriate to really immerse themselves in interactive games that promote social emotional learning, for example, um, then like see
Yeah.
what interests them about it. What is bringing them into that world? What are they learning? Like being curious. I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes we feel like we have to be creative and kids have to be creative, but let's throw creativity aside for the minute and just being curious
Yes.
can be a way to learn more about what your kid is enjoying, to learn more about yourself, the world around you. So I feel like curiosity is the balance to creativity and critical
Yes.
thinking.
I love that. And I think curiosity is the most underrated human skill. Like if we
Oh,
were all a little bit more curious, it'd be a lot less fighting and a lot less hating and a lot more just accepting and getting to know one another. So I think it is the most underrated skill. So yes, on the curiosity thing. Yes. So
yes.
with that, so before we do our final takeaways, are there any questions that you wish I asked that I didn't?
I feel like you
It's an
asked so
ooh.
many good questions. See, this is where my own curiosity is coming in. I almost feel like I want to ask you a question.
Ask.
Um, yeah, not that because I feel like you asked me a bunch of questions, but like you gave so many like insights into your experience as a parent. What do you feel like about hearing some of like my experience and how that can like impact more of like your connection with not only your kid but children, right? Like what are you feeling
Yeah.
like you're taking away that maybe I could expand more on?
That's a great question. I'm glad you turned it around. I think one of the big ahas for me. So first of all, I love the curiosity conversation. I think that's key because I think creativity, yeah, can be scary. That's a scary word for some people.
Mhm.
Curiosity is a human, it's we're I don't know if we're all designed to be curious, but like it's a skill we can nurture.
Yeah.
I love that. But I will tell you the knee jerk language that comes out of my mouth. I'm going to give you an example.
Mhm.
I am very quick to say be careful to Charlie.
Mm.
And I've been
Mhm.
quick all his life to say be careful. Not recognizing now that he's so verbal and communicative, like I realize I shaped a little fear instead of
Mm.
saying be safe, which
Mm.
is a very, very different way to approach me being worried when he's jumping up and down and about to hit his head. Like I mean, every parent's constantly like, oh, um, but I recognize the power of language, and that specific example has really come really full circle to me recently. And I'm realizing as Charlie and I engage around curiosity and creativity now more, like we always were very imaginative together, like going on pirate hunts or going on like ghost
Mm.
hunts and spooky hunts during, Halloween or, twinkly light hunts during Christmas. Like we're always hunting. So we always had a lot of imagination together. But now that we get into art projects, now that we're doing art projects together, I I'm going to be more mindful of the language I'm using because I've
Mm.
been labeling it and I didn't realize the impact that that's probably having. So that was like huge nugget. And also a reminder, a refresher on the Piaget stages. It's been a long time.
Yeah, we all need a little refresher sometimes, and I'm glad like there's such a practical example here to like relate to because I think if I can just add to what you said, and
Please, please.
especially, since you're latching on more to the curiosity part of this, which I
Hmm.
love, um, like instead of like looking at something and feeling like you want to label it, like asking a question instead. I feel like that's always a great approach to
Yeah,
continue a conversation, to continue learning. So I think it even
absolutely.
applies in that case scenario.
Absolutely. Because ultimately, I'm not interested in what I think. I am interested in what
Yeah,
he thinks.
exactly.
Like, yeah, it's cool. And I think I can foster that more. So that was that, yeah, that was those are big takeaways. So, and on that note, if there were like 5 or 6 takeaways that you want parents to or parenting adults to walk away with, what are these 5?
Well, I think to bring it back to the start of our conversation, I would say for parents to just feel free to like express themselves
Mm-hmm.
honestly and creatively in everything they do. And that can be whatever that means to them. Who are you? How do you want to communicate, right? Be honest with yourself and creativity will follow, right? I think another takeaway would be to tap into their inner child more often, right?
Yeah.
This is that part of ourselves that like we see in our children, but that we always don't like foster and promote into
Mm-hmm.
adulthood. And that's that like playful, spontaneous part of ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think another is just again get involved in creative projects, or if the discomfort is there, observe them, ask questions about them, be involved, be there to
Mm-hmm.
witness. And I think a lot can happen from that, both for children and parents alike. Okay, let me think of a few others. Yeah, we talked a lot about strengths. So, creativity, curiosity, critical thinking, like being able to spot those in other people, I think is so key, right? To be able to say, Nicole, oh, your creativity just is next level. Like, it makes me wanna be more creative. Like, how good does that feel, right? It's
So good.
uplifting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
good.
doing that more and seeing how that echoes and, like, translates into the behaviors of children. They're gonna pick
Mm-hmm.
up on that. They're gonna do the same. And then on that note of modeling, just modeling this balance between curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking, right? Modeling curious, creative, and critical thinking in your approach to life, right? If we can hold those C's
Yeah.
gently and kind of juggle them as we need to, it'll kind of benefit no matter if we're doing a professional endeavor, a personal endeavor, interacting with kids, all of it.
I love it. And I love everything you're saying, because like I'm putting on my, my clinical and my organizational psychologist hat right now. And I'm realizing like there's such transferability. Is that a word?
I
Yeah,
think so.
I think so.
It's a big smart word.
It's a big, yes, all of a sudden I got smart. It's like, it's such it's so important for us as adults. Like we lose touch with it. And I love another thing you just said, that be curious and creative in the ways that you're curious and creative. Like sometimes we don't think about cooking being a creative thing, or sometimes we don't think about the work we do being a creative thing, or sometimes we don't think about, you know, the way we listen to music or the way we
Yeah,
communicate. Like all of the stuff we do in life is pretty creative and pretty
yeah.
like curious, inspiring. So it's kind of cool. This was great. This was great. Demi, I'm so appreciative having this time to talk to you. I have learned so much. And it was a wonderful time spent. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was so great talking to you, and good luck to all the parents out there.
Yes.
All
Yes.
right.
Not easy.
Not.
Thanks, Demi.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Hey Kiddo. If you like what you hear, give us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about Hey Kiddo at our website, hey-kiddo.com. Have a question for our experts? Email us at hello@hey-kiddo.com.